Welcome to the show. Once again, we have a fabulous lineup of guests to energise and inspire you.
It's time to wake up your wow with your host, international award-winning speaker, Cath Vincent.
On the show, immunising yourself from fear with comedian Terry Williams. Christine Norton on creating a living legacy from your life story. Criminologist Ronald Kramer on the surprising art of graffiti. And in the Wilde Records music slot with Jesse Wilde, we hear music from Kiwi legend Midge Marsden. All this and more to wake up your wow. Terry, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Cath. Pleasure to be here.
Now, listen, you are an engagement specialist. What does that mean? It's not to do with weddings, is it?
No, not at all. Not even remotely. It's a good question, and it's not like I'm a plumber or an electrician. It's very obvious from the label what it is.
Yeah.
So I help companies, I help business people engage their people. So
Right.
I'm a trainer, I'm a speaker, I'm an event host and those sorts of things.
So when you say engagement, what do you mean by that?
Well, the literal term of employee engagement, for example,
Yeah.
is people doing more than they have to because they choose to.
Right.
So we talk about employee motivation, we talk about employee morale, we talk about happiness.
Yeah.
But what the evidence shows actually makes a difference is this thing called engagement, where people, they do more than they have to because they choose to. They show up, they've got a mission, they work with people that they like, admire, respect, they're getting additional skills, and they can see something coming out the other end that makes a difference.
Right. So what kinds of things can a business owner do to help their people be happier and more engaged?
Well, develop them in terms of their skill, give them some sense of autonomy and control, and the big one at the end, purpose. So I talk about mastery, autonomy and purpose. If you ever read Dan Pink, that's what he talks about in terms of employee engagement.
Yeah.
And so a man on the moon, a computer on every desktop, what is it that this company is actually trying to do? And what am I contributing to that?
Right. Okay. So it's about a person knowing why they're there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Why bother showing up for work every day?
Yeah. And I've got to be honest at this point, Cath. I've got a confession to make.
Oh, honesty.
So this has all been so very serious so far. And it's a great chance on your show to give you a bit of an exclusive,
Yeah.
a exclusive.
Drum roll. Did you hear that?
So I also have a secret double life.
Uh-oh.
So in addition to all this serious business stuff and
Yeah.
engaging employees for bosses, for revenue and profitability and so forth, I'm also a professional stand-up comedian.
Yeah. Now that is like a kind of complete schizophrenic in action, isn't it?
Well, I do try and keep it a secret double life, but...
I don't think it's a secret anymore.
No. Well, surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, a lot of my clients, once they find out, are thrilled to bits.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to kind of keep it under wraps. In my training courses, for example, they're a lot of fun, time simply flies by, and the feedback's, a lot of it is around the humour.
Well, it would be hard to keep it a secret, because I think the first time I saw you, you were actually on stage, you know, not in a corporate environment, but actually being hilarious. So.
I think about 87 seconds is my record for keeping it under wraps
Yeah.
until I say something either clever or not clever enough.
Yeah. So how did you get into being a stand-up comedian? It sounds very different from doing engagement and the corporate environment.
And again, good question. I wasn't the funny guy at school. I wasn't the class clown. And I wasn't, even in my group of friends, I'm not the funny guy. But I was maybe 2001, 2002, had young children, 2 and 4. And at that, I was in a very samey job, you know, a good job, but very routine, very run-of-the-mill. I was feeling a little bit square peg in a round hole.
Been there, done that,
As many people.
Yeah, not there now.
Great, and good decision, well made.
Thank you.
And a lot of people, they just get slapped with an external event that makes that decision for them.
Yeah.
But your choice and my choice was deliberate and proactive.
Yes.
So young kids, world of discovery, and every day's a new day. Wow, the sky's blue again. What are the odds? And I want some of that back.
Yeah, kids are great for that.
Not childish, but childlike spirit.
Yes.
So from that point on, I invented my thing, which is every year I resolved to do 2 new dangerous things.
Ooh.
2 dangerous things a year is my slogan, if you like. And that first year happened to be snow skiing and stand-up comedy.
Yeah, I would probably rather do stand-up comedy than snow skiing. Yeah,
Oh,
not
okay.
very coordinated in that way.
No.
Yeah.
It's the same as it turned out, and it's really expensive and overrated.
Well, the hospital stay.
The chairlifts. That's outrageously stressful. But I did my first gig, absolutely killed, knocked it out of the park. second and third gig died on my butt.
Oh, really?
Fourth gig, back on the horse, and I've done 1,000 since.
So you know what it's like to be brilliant on stage, and you know what it's like to die on stage.
Absolutely, and that's the exposure I think is really useful for people outside of comedy. Not everyone's going to be a comedian, and nor should they.
Yeah.
But the whole notion of putting yourself out there, not waiting for an external life event to happen like the heart attack or the breakup or the job loss, but to deliberately and incrementally create these opportunities where you almost immunise yourself against change.
Yeah, I like that. Immunise yourself. I guess, you know, we don't do stuff because we're kind of scared, and it shrinks our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what next for you? Like, you know, what kind of crazy things are you doing now? How do you stay finding things that frighten you?
Well, I guess as you get older and life changes, new things come along. Some of the things I've done in the past, I try not to pre-think it. So I've done the jumping out of planes, I've done the bungee jumping, I've done the motor racing and so forth. And now it's getting into things like, I spent a year learning how to play guitar and singing, despite having no ability at all, naturally at all.
Yeah.
And then performing before a couple hundred people at a little show.
Oh, right. I was going to say, playing guitar and singing, even if you're not very good, it's not that scary, but...
No, it's that going out in front of people and actually doing it. And I'm sure there are musicians who would say the same thing about comedy.
Yeah.
But again, with immunisation, I'm desensitised now.
Yeah.
I've got a gig next weekend. I had a gig last Wednesday at a little pub in Ponsonby. Pretty high risk. You know, some people are there just to eat dinner. And you suddenly show up with a microphone in front of them telling what may be jokes.
Yes, and they start throwing bread rolls.
Oh, there's none of that, but generally you do hear it's the clunk of the cutlery that's soul-destroying.
Yeah.
So, and again, after 15 years, you don't live on the highs of the roller coaster, you don't die on the lows of the roller coaster, and you see the new comedians coming through. They do. They get ecstatic with every success and they get diminished with every failure.
Yeah.
But after 1,000, it's just...
So most of the things that you've talked about on a fear basis seem like adrenaline-based things, you know, jumping out of planes and tackling very scary things, obviously. But what can you do if you're not sporty or adventurous in that way?
Well, again, some people it's simply quitting the job. I was having a wee chat before with someone about how this all sort of turned out the way it did. And the first date was 2001, 2002 when I started doing comedy. But there's a phrase we use in comedy, don't give up your day job.
Yeah.
And at some point you do. And for me that was 2008. I quit the day job. I've been sort of incrementally building up the comedy business and the speaking and the training on the side. And I thought, well, if not me, who? If not now, when?
Yeah.
I quit my day job. And about 65 seconds later, the global financial crisis happened.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, okay, let's pay some rent now, shall we? And so those little things, that was going to happen anyway. And some people, would you rather have 25 years of unhappiness doing a job you don't really like that just pays the bills and then look back with regret? It's the classic survey done of people who work in hospices and things like that, talking to people and their regrets on their deathbed. And I forget the exact number, but something like 85% aren't regrets about things they did. It's things they didn't do.
Totally. Well, don't regret things that you didn't do. That's your message for today, isn't it?
Very much so.
Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Cath.
Next up, it's time to tell the story of your life.
Christine, welcome. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, you are a personal historian. Tell me a bit about what you do.
Yes. A personal historian simply writes people's life stories.
Wow, well, that sounds like a lot of fun. Is it very time-consuming and laborious?
Never laborious. It's a privilege and an honour to be invited into someone's life.
Yes, I imagine that.
Yes.
So really, you're preserving the history of a person's story before they pass on.
Oh, well, yes, you could say that. But we're not genealogists.
Yeah.
So that's all about the dead people.
Okay, so typically a person would say to you, hey, I want to put together my family story for, my mum or my grandfather or someone close to me.
Yes.
And then how would you go about that?
We meet with them first of all to find out what the scope that they're thinking of and if there's a deadline. And then we work out what I call a roadmap, which is what subject areas do they want to cover. Yeah. And then we take it from there. We use a digital recorder, and it's a process. It takes a while.
Yeah, and you produce these amazing books. I mean, they're absolutely stunning.
Our philosophy, Cath, is that they must look stunning and gorgeous not only on the outside, but in the inside as well. So we
Yeah.
have maps, and we actually have 2 designers working on our books now.
I'm not
Graphic
surprised. Looking at
designs.
them, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, every double page spread is designed.
Yeah, beautiful. The binding on this one's beautiful.
Thank you. Actually, this one I just delivered to the client first thing this morning.
On your way here.
Yeah, in a way. I love this binding because we can add chapters in the back. I mean, if you're working with a 70-year-old, a 60-year-old, they might have a lot more living to do.
Yes.
And they want to be able to add to their story, so we can with this binding.
And didn't you kind of research and essentially invent that kind of binding?
Yes, I did. I worked with a bookbinder here in Auckland because it seems to me that if you permanently bind something, and they live another 20 years, what are you going to do? Write another book?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a client who's thinking of volume 2 already, but that makes sense. You just change the contents in the front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're really working at the level of detail of really what was life like for that person.
It's incredible. I mean, the way people lived their lives in the 1920s, 30s, 40s is light years away from how young people live now. I mean, some of the people I talked to had no electricity. The toilet was the long drop down the back of the section.
And kids today that have no idea.
No idea.
Kids today.
No, that's right. Yeah,
My daughter's in the audience. I'm just pointing at it now.
Yeah. And the thing is, Cath, that people don't need to have climbed mountains or swum oceans. It's the ordinary, everyday life that the great-grandchildren and the grandchildren find so fascinating.
I love that point that you make, because people would say, well, my life's very
I
ordinary.
haven't done anything special, but the point is that how they lived and what they did, how they cooked, how they ate, how they walked to school or went to school on the horse, whatever, that's fascinating to young ones now. And so if people don't record those stories, it's lost.
Yeah, and interesting, looking through these beautiful books, I think about, people in my life who've passed and go, gosh, what a shame.
Yes.
I'd love to have a book like that now, you know, but the moment's gone.
Yes.
So do you find that people are actually preserving wisdom as well, not just the stories, but wisdom to pass on?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, what we write, what we suggest for the ending is not a conclusion, but a legacy letter.
Ooh,
because
I
I
like
say to
that.
our clients, look, you can put anything into this story. It's your story. So if you want to write about your philosophy of life, your values, a bit of good old-fashioned advice, go for it.
Yeah.
Because how else will the youngsters know?
Yeah.
And it's not the little ones or the teenagers who are so interested in great-grandma's story. It's when they have their own children, they get married and they have their own children, then they'll read it.
Yes.
Yeah. And so then it's there. It's in writing, it's an enduring legacy.
So what would you write in your own legacy letter?
I say to people, you don't have to put everything in.
Yeah.
But if you don't put the tough times as well as the good times, then your story isn't balanced.
Yeah. So what would your advice be in your legacy letter?
I think your passion, just do something which you're passionate about. In fact, my daughter is a qualified lawyer and she's just resigned and she said, no, I'm going to do interior design. It's my passion. And
good on her.
That's her decision.
And in fact, that's
Yes,
exactly what Terry
yes.
was just talking about.
Exactly. And there's no free lunch either.
Yeah.
Things like that.
There is today.
Oh, that's great. But things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And clients get right into this, and they write, they think about what they want to pass on and write it up accordingly.
So that sounds like great advice for all of us. Live your passion and do enough that you can create a book from it.
And live from what you're doing.
Thank you.
That's right. Thank you for your time, Cath.
Next up, a childhood crime becomes a lifelong passion.
Ronald, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, you're something of a commentator on the subject of graffiti.
That's right.
So
yes.
where do you stand on the debate about whether graffiti is art or just pure vandalism?
I actually think it's neither of those two.
Yeah.
I won't, it's a long story as to why it's not either of those. It's not vandalism for me because I don't think it actually damages the property in a physical sense. But I also don't think it's art for a lot of reasons necessarily. I think art is a very complicated category. I think of it these days more as entertainment, as a form of popular culture and entertainment.
Right, and certainly, I mean, there is evidence of graffiti as being amazing in its artistic nature, and we have some examples we'll just have a look at. So, I mean, that is fabulous. You'd have to be pretty talented to produce something like that.
Yeah, I think it takes a long time to learn those skills and develop those skills, and it's a sort of product of people who are very dedicated to their craft and spend a lot of time thinking about it and obsessing over it. So it's sort of something that comes with an obsession with being creative, I think, is what often drives a lot of graffiti production, is the desire to be creative.
So why would a person use graffiti as a means, you know, spray painting walls or whatever, rather than, you know, some other medium?
I think there's a lot of diverse reasons why people get involved with graffiti writing and why they choose the medium. Most of the graffiti writers that I've ever spoken to or have known, they typically say that they saw it somewhere. They usually saw a more impressive form of graffiti writing and it just kind of spoke to them and they were hooked from that moment. So I think it's still a bit of a mystery as to what it is that engages people, but I think it's something about its visual nature.
But you actually have been a graffiti artist yourself.
Yeah, I've been a graffiti writer since 1989 or something.
Right, so you must have been a kid then.
I was very young, yes, and it started off not so legal, let's put it that way, and then as I got older I sort of transitioned more into legal graffiti and more acceptable forms, I suppose you could say.
Right. So how does a graffiti writer end up being a senior lecturer in criminology? That sounds like quite a big leap.
Yeah, well, I think that the academic work and the graffiti stuff is very much connected and they come from the same place. Both forms are about composition, craft, sort of creativity. And I often think of academic work as art and as creative. There's a style to it that you try and develop.
Yeah.
You try and develop a voice in that. You do the same thing in graffiti. It also happened to be the case that my graffiti background led to my dissertation work, so my doctoral work, and that led to my sort of first academic book on graffiti. So the two also overlap in those respects.
Right. So your latest book is a study of graffiti in New York.
Yeah, so this first book is about the rise of legal graffiti, as it's titled. So that's a phenomenon that sort of happened in the early to mid-1990s in many respects. And legal graffiti kind of emerged because the subway graffiti was sort of, the city clamped down on that. And I think one of the things that happened was graffiti just went above ground.
So they had to find new ways to do it because it took so long that you couldn't really do it in secret.
Because it was time consuming, yeah. And so the best way to do that, when the trains were sort of, you know, a lot more security was put in place, was to start asking property owners for permission. And a lot of them said yes. And so now we have legal graffiti. That's led to the rise of a graffiti industry. So now there's all these spray paints that graffiti writers have started their own companies, manufacturing or helping companies manufacture materials that are specific to graffiti.
Yeah.
And so that's now, there's all this new spray paint. You think spray paint can't get any more better, but it just gets better and better. It's incredible. You think you cannot possibly push this any further. But then they come up with something new and it just pushes the art form even further.
That's interesting because, you know, if I see a tag on a building, I don't instantly think, wow, there's a whole industry here, it's good for the economy, it's good for creativity and art. You know, we tend to go, oh, goodness, clean that off.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, one of the problems that graffiti confronts is that by default, it's a very public culture, and so you get the best and the worst of it. I quite like the tags. I don't think they're that bad, but of course I'm going to be a little biased. But I think a graffiti writer looks at a tag or throw up in a piece and they think, well, either of those things can be good or they can be bad. So there's bad tags for me, but there's also good tags. I think most of the public say the colourful stuff is okay, but we don't like the tags and the throw-ups.
So there are different types of graffiti, though.
So there's three basic forms in graffiti writing, the tag, the throw-up and the piece. And so the tag is basically a signature. The throw-up is the bigger, usually bubbly, basic letters done with two colours or one colour.
Right.
And then the piece is the more elaborate, colourful form.
Right. So when we see, I guess, the graffiti that we see that we go, wow, that's amazing, that's the piece or the masterpiece, isn't it?
Most people look at the piece, the colourful stuff, and they say, oh, I like the colourful stuff.
Yeah.
I don't like the tagging and the throw-ups.
Yeah, okay. So, and tagging is really just like, you know, kind of putting your signature there, isn't it?
Yeah, tagging started, its initial function was to get the name out there and around, but I would say within graffiti writing culture now, it's more recognised as artistic and creative as well.
Right.
So I see some tags and I think some look terrible because they're aesthetically bad, but then I see some tags and I think they're absolutely beautiful and amazing, and it takes a lot of skill to be able to produce certain tags.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of tags certainly around the city that they just literally say Bob, and you go, there's nothing that special about writing your name, you know.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the problems of graffiti writing culture, is that it's by definition, it's public, and so it's unfiltered. And you could compare that, say, to music production, where you fortunately don't have to listen to every garage band, right? Because there's a whole industry that filters that for you. Graffiti writing doesn't have that quality to it, and so you sort of have to put up with the best and worst of it, I suppose you could say.
Yeah. So you've come a long way from those early days when you first discovered graffiti.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of, I feel it's come a bit full circle. But like I say, I think the same kind of creativity goes into both of these forms, and I think they're both about pursuing passions and things that I'm interested in, and it's good to have two spaces. I feel very lucky that I feel people are lucky if they get to pursue one passion in life. I get to pursue two simultaneously.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for joining us and sharing your passion.
Thank you.
Next up, the Wilde Records music slot with Jesse Wilde.
Jesse Wilde, welcome back.
Good to be here.
So, what you been doing this last week?
I'm working hard in the studio as usual, doing a bit of work upstairs where we live.
Yeah. And who's recording in the studio right now?
Well, on today's show we have Midge Marsden, Kiwi music legend.
How exciting! How are you getting all these people into the studio? It's fantastic.
Well, you know, it's just getting on the phone, and I met Midge many years ago. We played a gig, we did a support gig for him in Motueka, of all places, at a place called the Post Office Hotel, and my first band, Acoustic Attitude.
And how long ago is that?
Mate, that was in the early 90s.
You're showing your age, right?
And it's been a while, but he's playing with Chet O'Connell, who was also on the show.
Fantastic, we know Chet.
What season was he on?
Oh, goodness, can't remember, but he's awesome.
A little while back.
Well, let's hear from Midge and Chet.
Let's do that.
When you wake up in the morning, yeah, the ding-dong ring, you go marching to the table. It's the same old thing, no food upon the table, no pork in my pan. If you make a noise about it, you're in trouble with the man. Let the midnight special shine a light on me. I got 30 long years in the penitentiary. Let the midnight special shine a light on me. Let that midnight special shine its ever-loving light on me. Yonder comes Miss Rosie. How in the world did you know? By the way she wears her apron and the clothes she wore, umbrella on her shoulder, piece of paper in her hand. She come to see the governor. She wants to free her man. Let the midnight special shine a light on me. penitentiary, let the midnight special shine a light on me. Let that midnight special shine its ever-loving light on me. If you ever go to Houston, man, you better walk right. Neither stagger or a stumble. And don't you pick a fight, cause the sheriff will arrest you, take you on down. If the jury says guilty, you're penitentiary bound. Let the midnight special, oh, shine a light on me. I got 30 long years in the penitentiary. Let the midnight special shine a light on me. Let that midnight special shine its ever-loving light on me.
Welcome.
Nice to see you.
Oh, how great that you're here. So, Chet, I know, but you and I haven't ever met before. How have we managed to not meet till now?
Oh, possibly because I haven't lived in Auckland for as long as you have.
Yeah.
I've been a rural boy for a long time. I lived in Raglan for some years.
Yeah.
So,
Legend, icon, what should we call you?
Legend will do.
He's both. He's a legend and an icon.
I mean, you've done so much for New Zealand music. You've been around a long time now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess I'm a refugee of the 60s.
Yeah.
One of the last standing. Maybe. No, there's quite a few people from my era still performing. Still
Yeah,
playing.
go you. And you and Chet do a lot together now, don't you?
We do. And when I first met Chet, I'd never done an acoustic thing before. We'd
Wow.
never done a duo thing. And he said, look, I think we could do this.
Yeah, I think you can do it. It's
Well,
working.
Well, I've always just been lucky enough to have great musicians around me, and I got pushed up to the front. You be the front person.
Yeah.
So, but this was a whole new thing, and I was quite quite a while to get used to it. And but with him by my side, it makes life a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, well, it's a fabulous
And
duo
I enjoy
right
it.
there.
And
It
we-
works great. I mean, Midge, you know, it gives him the freedom to sing his songs and tell his stories and relate all that information he's got and that passion he's got about the music that we play, you know. So, and the dynamic of it's really good. I think people enjoy as well. It's just us being, I guess, from different generations, but being in all brought up from that same history of music. I think that, that we all love, you know, and so it's great, and it's always good fun. I mean, I've been playing with Midge for 16 years now, so
Wow.
you know, it's always been such a privilege. You know, we have a ball.
Yeah, we do, and it's good, as Chet said, with the storytelling. You know, I talk far too much, sometimes, way too much.
Well, you know, that's common amongst everyone on the sofa. I'm just going to say.
Because you're an acoustic duo, you're usually in a smaller room, or not necessarily, but you've got time to talk to people rather than just hammer through a set of 25 songs and say nothing. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy that part of it, the talking part. Yeah.
And that was a beautiful take on a classic song. You know, we all know the song, but that's really quite a different take on it.
And there's a story behind every song, and sometimes the stories are different.
And as we just discovered when we were talking before this thing about that song, and now I'm going to have to go away and do some more research. Because I've been lying to my audience when I play that song for many years now.
Well, not necessarily, but
Well, stories evolve over time, don't they?
That's
With
the-
each telling, it's like Chinese whispers.
you can embellish the stories, you know.
Exactly.
Well, hey, it's awesome having a bunch of storytellers on the sofa today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Cheers, thanks, Catherine. Great to be here.
My thanks to all my special guests, to Terry, to Christine, to Ronald, to Midge and Chet, and of course, our very own Jessie Wilde. And until next time, don't wait to wake up your wow.
Well, look, Midge, you're at 173. That's you.
Oh, yeah?